apprehension, we like to think that totalitarian systems are ruled by a sort of singular, top-down tyrant. Hitler, Stalin, Lenin. It's like, no. A totalitarian state is ruled by the lie. And the lie is the principle of governance, and everyone who lies is complicit in maintenance of the state. And so, you know, the Soviet joke, we pretend to work, they pretend to pay us. And so, a totalitarian state isn't the freedom-loving masses pining for deliverance out of the desert, but oppressed by the thumb of Stalin. It's every single person lying about absolutely everything to themselves and everyone they love 100% of the time. And so, and sometimes that lie is just silence. The useful idiots always think, this will never happen to me. You see this with the Democrats in the US. So I just interviewed Robert F. Kennedy, who in principle is a Democrat. So they took down the interview. And that just shocked me because it's a presidential campaign. And now YouTube can censor a presidential candidate mid-election and there isn't a peep from the left. And the reason for that is they think, well, Kennedy's not a real Democrat, without noticing for a second that the definition of real Democrat is going to get increasingly narrow as we move forward, and that's already happened, you know. And I tried for years talking to the Democrats, probably 36 senators and congressmen alike, always asking them the same question. I asked Robert Kennedy this too. When does the left go too far? And to a man or a woman, they were either unwilling or unable to answer that question. And so, well, so here we are with this increasing, the increasing normalization of censorship and canceling. And this, by the way, is also a technique that's used by dark tetrad types, right? It's the female equivalent of antisocial behavior, right? So men who are antisocial tend to use physical aggression, but females who are antisocial tend to use reputation destruction and denigration, gossip, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. And that's unbelievable. Now, men can do that too, and will, and do, especially online. But that's enabled by the corporations, you know, the media corporations who are in control of social media communication. So, yeah, people think, well, as long as it's only happening to Kennedy. It's like, have it your way, dimwits. Our education system in the West has been gripped by the delusion since the Second World War that authoritarianism was purely a right-wing phenomenon. Which is, of course, to call that delusional, you know. There was Stalin, there was Lenin, there was Mao, there was Pol Pot. I mean, how many goddamn examples do you need? So obviously there's left-wing authoritarianism, but the game on the left is that, well, that doesn't really exist, or that was a misapplication of a perfectly functional theory. I asked a friend of mine, a Jewish guy, why so many Jewish people in the Soviet Union were attracted to communism. And he said, because it offered the possibility of universal brotherhood. You know, and that's the difference between, say, fascism in its more explicit forms and communism, is that communism at least says we could all be brothers, right? And that's an attractive doctrine. And I suppose at the time of the Russian Revolution, it wasn't self-evident that that idea was doomed to failure. Now, it's bloody well self-evident now, if evidence means anything at all to you. But there's that attraction in the communist doctrine of equality, which is sort of what we want in our families, and then universal brotherhood, which is a paradisal dream, I suppose. Of course, in the bowels of the communist conceptual structure are policies that are absolutely 100% murderously counterproductive. But they sound good too, like from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. You know, it sounds paradisal. It means, well, everybody could have their needs met. Of course, you instantly entangle yourself in, well, what is a need and whose need is deemed paramount? And that's complete bloody hell. And then, well, who defines ability, and how do you know when someone's contributing to the limits of their ability, right? Because they can still stand up. So, you know, there are these glossy, attractive slogans. Slogan, by the way, that's derived from two Welsh words, slwag and garum, and that means battle cry of the dead. Right, so these these slogans that appeal to people who know nothing, who are thoughtless, who are motivated to some degree by their compassion, in the case, let's say, of the useful idiots, and then motivated by the desire to use compassion as a camouflage by the more psychopathic types. But it sounds good, and the left can claim, well, you know, it was a really good idea, and look at all the terrible things capitalism does, and capitalism does concentrate power and wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer people, which it does, but so does every other economic system ever invented or discovered, so it's not, you know, attributable to capitalism. And so that, combined with this promise of universal brotherhood and the desire of the radical leftists to overthrow the capitalist endeavor, means that the faculties of education produce teachers who know nothing about what actually happened in the 20th century, because they don't know anything about anything at all, and even if they did know, would be inclined to downplay it or to excuse it with, you know, hand waving like, well, that wasn't real communism.